Okay, what do you think the fiery hearts of the biggest stars have in common with, say, the toughest, tiniest microbes on our own planet? It sounds like a strange question, right? But today, we're going to connect those exact two things: the cosmic origins of life and its absolute mind bending limits. We're going from stardust to extremes.
Now, you've probably heard this phrase a million times. We're all made of stardust. And it sounds kind of poetic, right? But it's not just a nice thought. It is literally a scientific fact. I mean, the carbon in your cells, the oxygen you're breathing right now, every single critical element that makes you, was forged in the belly of a massive star and then blasted across the cosmos in a spectacular explosion.
So, that's pretty wild to think about. But it leads to a really fascinating question. If the universe is making the building blocks for life up there in the stars, once those ingredients actually come together and life gets going, what are its absolute limits? How hot can it get? How cold? How extreme can an environment be before life just gives up? That's the mystery we're going to unravel today.
All right, first things first. To get to the bottom of this, we need to understand the factories themselves, the stars that make all this stuff. And you know what? The key to unlocking their secrets came from a very unexpected place. It's a story about an unlikely hero who accidentally started a revolution in astrophysics. So let's meet the guy. His name is Bill Paxton. And here's the thing. He wasn't an astrophysicist. He was a brilliant computer scientist. In fact, he was one of the key people at Adobe who created PostScript, the language that basically makes PDFs work. He was super successful, retired early, but he was definitely not the kind of guy to just sit around and do nothing. So what does a restless tech pioneer do with all that free time? Well, around the year 2000, Paxton literally grabs a backpack and just starts showing up to graduate-level astrophysics classes. And this wasn't just some casual hobby. He got obsessed. He started thinking, hey, I can apply my software skills to this huge problem they have, modeling the life of a star. By 2011, that little retirement project had a name, MESA. And yeah, it was about to change everything. And this just shows you the kind of person we're talking about. The director of the Kavli Institute, a guy named Lars Bildston, said that Paxton wasn't just, sitting in the back of the class. No, he was doing all the homework and was even correcting the TAs sometimes. He was just a total force of nature. So to really get why this was such a big deal, you have to understand what came before. The old codes for modeling stars, they were ancient. I mean, built for 1970s computers. They were clunky, they would crash all the time, and they could only simulate a tiny range of stars. Paxton came in and thought about it like a modern software developer. He built something flexible, powerful, and super efficient, a tool that could model pretty much any star you could throw at it. And here it is. This is the big reveal. The result of all his work, his code, MESA, could simulate the entire life of a star. We're talking billions of years, from its birth to its final dramatic collapse, in less than a day. Less than a day. Something that was basically impossible before, something that would have taken ages of supercomputing time, could now be done on a regular old desktop computer. Just amazing. So remember that director, Lars Bildston? When he finally heard what Paxton's code could do, his reaction wasn't some long, complicated scientific analysis. It was just two words: oh my. And that says it all, doesn't it? That's the sound of someone realizing the game has completely changed. Paxton had essentially handed astronomers a virtual universe in a box. Okay, so because of people like Bill Paxton, we now have this incredible tool for understanding where life's ingredients even come from. But now let's pivot. Let's bring it back from the stars all the way back down to Earth. Because now we have to ask, what does life actually do with those ingredients once it gets them, especially when it's pushed to the absolute edge? Right, but before we can talk about life's limits, we should probably agree on what life even is. Here's a really great way to think about it. Think of it like a computer. It's got software, which is its DNA. It's got hardware, the proteins and all the physical bits that run the software. And, of course, it needs a power cord plugged into the wall, a constant flow of energy, which we call metabolism. So, here on Earth, all known life fits into three big categories. You've got bacteria and archaea. These are both single-celled microbes. And then you have the eukaryotes. Now, that's us. It's everything with more complex cells: plants, animals, fungi, the whole shebang. And, as we're about to find out, their ability to handle the rough stuff is, well, it's not even close. All right, let's start with the heat. How hot is too hot for life?
And I don't just mean surviving for a few minutes. I mean, what's the absolute highest temperature where an organism can actually live its life, grow, reproduce, the whole cycle? The answer is 122 degrees Celsius. Let that sink in. That's 252 Fahrenheit. It's way, way hotter than boiling water. The current record holder is this little microbe from the archaea group called Methanopyrus candler. And they found it just chilling, totally thriving next to a volcanic vent at the bottom of the ocean. Incredible. And when you lay it all out, you see this really clear pattern. The archaea are the undisputed kings of heat, maxing out at that crazy 122 degrees. Bacteria are pretty tough too. They can handle boiling right around 100 degrees C. But us, the complex eukaryotes, we tap out at around 60 degrees. It seems like the more complex you get, the less heat you can take. Okay, so that's the furnace. But what about the other way? What about the deep freeze? What happens at the other end of the thermometer? Just how cold is too cold for life to keep on ticking? Well, for most of the tiny, single-celled organisms, the floor is about minus 20 degrees Celsius. That's minus 4 Fahrenheit. At that point, the water inside the cell literally turns into a kind of glass. It vitrifies, and metabolism just stops. The hardware, the physical parts of the cell, just can't work anymore. And here we go again. We see the same pattern. The bigger, more complex life forms are way more fragile. You've got these incredible communities of animals on the seafloor in Antarctica, and they are living right on the edge at about minus 2 degrees Celsius. Any colder than that, and they can't complete their life cycle. So when you look at it, the temperature range for complex life like us is actually pretty darn narrow. So let's pause for a second. We have these two amazing pieces of the puzzle. We've got the story of the stars, where the raw materials for life get cooked up. And then we have the story of Earth's toughest critters, showing us the brutal limits life can actually endure. So now, let's put them together. It's time to redefine what we even mean by habitable. Because this, really, is the big question, right? This is what drives so much of this work. When you take what we know about the stars and you combine it with what we know about biology at its most extreme, where does that tell us to look for life out there in the universe? It gives us this incredible two-part strategy. On one hand, the star models, like MESA, they tell us where to find the planets that have the right ingredients, the right stardust. And on the other hand, the extremophiles here on Earth, they show us the unbelievably harsh conditions that life can actually put up with. And when you put those together, it just blows the definition of a habitable world wide open. And honestly, this has completely changed the game for astrobiology. We used to be looking for Earth 2.0, a nice, comfy planet with blue oceans and perfect weather. But not anymore. Now, we're looking for any world that fits inside those extreme boundaries we just talked about. We're looking for planets that might be home to even the weirdest life we can imagine. And that's really the idea I want to leave you with. Think about it. We've learned that life, right here, on our home turf, is way tougher, way more resilient than we ever gave it credit for. So if this is what's possible on just one little planet, what other kinds of weird, tenacious life could be out there, waiting for us among the stars?